Yeah, that is a great way to bring down your approval rating. Supreme Court, take notes.
Hello, I'm Colin,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, episode 14 of season 3.
Just a reminder, we release episodes every week and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It's currently Monday, April 29th, 2024 at about 6:30 p.m. Pacific time as of us recording this. And we got a busy news week, so let's get right into it with the Supreme Court's hearing on presidential immunity. Colin, what's the
Yeah,
story?
Charlie. Yeah, I don't think you need to say it's a busy news week. We're in a presidential election year. I feel like that kind of goes without saying at this point. But even for presidential election years, the news is completely out of control this year. It's not every year where you get a hearing in the Supreme Court about whether a president, or really a former president, is immune from criminal prosecution. And it really is one of the crazy legal arguments, essentially that any president, any action that they take when they are in the Oval Office, they are immune from any legal consequences for that. They could, in theory, order SEAL Team 6 to go after their political opponents, to assassinate them, and there would be nothing that could be done to prosecute that president. That is essentially what the Trump lawyers have argued, and they appeal it all the way up to the Supreme Court, which they have the right to do. The Supreme Court decided to take their case, likely because, as we know, the Supreme Court is compromised, right? 3 of the justices were appointed by Trump. 5 of the justices were appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote, so they do not represent the will of the people. And this is a great delay tactic for Trump, as his trials, or the trials specifically related to acts that took place while he was in office, specifically the January 6th case, that cannot continue. So Trump is able to delay this, likely until after the election. Well, now the Supreme Court heard this legal theory, which is, again, crazy, and even the conservative justices who were trying their hardest could not figure out a way to justify arguing that a president has full immunity. So instead, what they did is they decided to kind of ignore the facts of the case. Move away from the whole what Trump is asking for immunity thing, and instead of ruling on that, essentially ruling that presidents maybe sometimes might have limited immunity, just a small amount. And so it's expected, I would say, at this point, we probably won't hear until early July, so that's another 2+ months delayed, that they're going to rule to send this back to the district court or an appeals court to make a decision on whether these particular crimes he should be immune to, whether presidents are immune to those. And then Trump could appeal that all the way back to the Supreme Court when they'd actually have to rule on that, which could push the trial, well, given that the Supreme Court wouldn't have to rule on that till late 2025, or sorry, middle of 2025, till well beyond the election. And of course, if Trump wins the election, none of this is even relevant. So Trump really getting help from his conservative Supreme Court justices. And it really strikes me, Charlie, how in Bush v. Gore, a case that essentially very directly benefited George W. Bush, a Republican, the Supreme Court was like, no, we're just evaluating this just on the facts of this case. This cannot be used as precedent for anything else. But then suddenly, when there's a case where the facts, there's really nothing there for Trump, they're like, no, we're just going to look at this like on a broader scale. We're not even going to really consider the facts of this individual case. We're not even going to rule on that. We're going to actually delay that for maybe another year until we actually rule on that, which, Charlie, is just absurd.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that there is really certainly that bias that really does help Trump here, that they're not really looking into the facts of this case as much and more using just the precedent of it, which I think is really an interesting thing to consider. But
I also think that like Trump should, if he thinks he's innocent, if he actually thinks he's innocent, he should want this ruled on as quickly as possible. He should want before the election to be proven innocent. But he has no interest in that, likely because he knows he's guilty.
yeah, I think that is interesting. If he really did think that he was not really in any threat here, I think he would want this to be pushed along as soon as possible, as to because he's obviously has another trial ongoing, and we'll get to that in a minute. And you think that if it's revealed that presidents have immunity, he would want to do that as quick as possible, as you mentioned. Speaking of which, shall we move on to Trump's hush money trial now?
Yes, so this is the trial that is ongoing. It is allowed to go through because these were not acts that he took as president. These were acts that he took in the lead up to his presidency regarding the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about his sexual assault of her following the release of the Access Hollywood tape. So this trial now entering its second week of actual arguments. The first week was just jury selection, and the prosecution has really called one main witness so far, David Pecker, the former chief of the National Enquirer. Prosecution expected this week to call more witnesses at some point during this case. We expect Stormy Daniels to take the stand and Michael Cohen for the prosecution. Unclear who might take the stand for the defense. Unclear if Trump will. He said that he wants to. It feels like that would probably help the prosecution more than it would help Trump. But Trump continuing to struggle with staying awake in court, Charlie, which is, I mean, not a good sign for mental stamina. And I feel like somewhat of a double standard there by calling Biden old. Biden actually at the White House Correspondents' Dinner Saturday night joked about Trump calling him Sleepy Don, obviously in reference to Trump's comments about Biden calling him Sleepy Joe. But then also there's this hearing on the gag order, which we did discuss in last week's episode, and so much more to come on this trial moving forward.
Yeah, and I talking about obviously the double standard between him and Biden. We talked about that quite a bit actually last week. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that, I would go take a look at that. Now we have some news from Arizona about the indictment of their fake electors. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so in Arizona, another indictment related to the 2020 election. This has to do with those fake electors that the Republicans tried to send to Congress. It is a crime to send an alternate slate of electors other than what the state had picked because you're trying to subvert the will of the people. So all 11 of the fake electors were indicted, as well as some other people, including John Eastman, Jenna Ellis, Mark Meadows, and Rudy Giuliani. Donald Trump was able to avoid indictment here, Charlie. He was named unindicted co-conspirator number 1. There could be a variety of reasons that the state declined to charge Donald Trump, but it really would have been something if he had had to skip a day of his New York hush money trial so that he could go and surrender to authorities in another jurisdiction on an entirely different set of charges, Charlie.
Yeah, and obviously that just optically that looks really bad for him. So we'll see how that develops, and I think it should be pretty obvious that if you have an election, you can't just put your own people in that then decide who the president is. That's not how that works.
Yeah, that's not generally how democracy goes. But you mentioned optics, though. I think that people are past caring about optics on a lot of these issues. Honestly, I mean, it's
Well,
an
we should be.
extraordinary state. No, sure, but it is an extraordinary statement. But I still believe it's true that Trump's indictment has not really cost him much support. His base has now turned to, yeah, it's okay to be a criminal as long as you're Trump, because the Biden crime family.
Yeah, I mean, again, with the double standards that we keep getting. Speaking of which, should we talk about Hunter Biden? He's now suing Fox News for all of the potential misinformation that has been spread about him over the course of basically the entire Biden campaign and Biden presidency. His connections to Ukraine, his computer, things like that. Colin, can we get a little bit more on some of the details of exactly what he's suing Fox News for?
Yeah, great unintentional segue, I guess. Yeah, we don't fully know everything yet because this suit has not actually been filed, but according to numerous reports, it is imminent. So Right, Fox News spread a lot of disinformation about Hunter Biden, and in addition to that, shared inappropriate photos of him. They took some data about him that they should not have had access to. So there's really a lot here that Hunter Biden could go after Fox for, as well as Newsmax, One American News, and potentially not just some of those networks, but potentially some individuals as well, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who showed his porn at a House committee hearing, or Rudy Giuliani, who had access to stuff that he should not have. So it doesn't sound like he's going to be suing these people, but it would seem that if he's going to sue Fox, he would have just as much right to sue these people as well.
Yeah, and obviously, depending on how that Fox News case goes, he may end up suing those people as well. I remember we actually talked about Marjorie Taylor Greene when we found out about the thing about her showing. Did she not show it in Congress?
Yeah, she showed it in Congress. Which, forgetting that you're like actually exposing somebody's photos that you have no right to have.
Then again, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. I wouldn't put it past her.
No, sure, but it is just a despicable act to be showing any content like that in the halls of Congress.
Absolutely. Speaking of Congress, Representative Donald Payne has died. He was a Democrat from New Jersey, and the Republicans needed help as the majority gets even thinner. This will help them with that. Obviously, it is very unfortunate that we've had yet another death in Congress, but you have to think going into the election cycle, Republicans must be happy to at least gain one more seat back.
Yeah, I mean, I expect that this seat will be filled by another Democrat at some point, but right now that seat's empty, and that seat's going to be empty until there's an election. Unclear yet if there's going to be enough time for a special election to fill that seat, but for now, it will benefit Republicans, give them a little bit more breathing room that they desperately need as they struggle to hold together their very divided caucus. And it is worth noting, too, that Payne was only 65, so there's a lot of members of Congress that you could say they probably shouldn't be there. They're just too old and fragile and on the verge of death anyway. But Payne did not seem to be one of those at all, so this is more of a surprising death, I would say.
Yeah, certainly. Should we move on now to, I don't know how things like this keep going. I think the midterms with something going on with a candidate and dogs. Now we have it happening again. Colin, what's going on?
Yeah, I think there was Dr. Oz in.
You're right. It was Dr. Oz.
And then George Santos too stole the puppies from the Amish somehow, which sounds like a completely fake headline. By the way, he's bringing back his Katara Ravache character on Cameo. So if for whatever reason you really want a cameo from a Katara Ravache, aka George Santos or whatever his actual name is, I'm not going to tell you what the URL is, but go find it yourself, and I promise you will regret it. But
if our editors don't notice, I may or may not put it in the description.
Do not. But yeah, back to the whole dogs thing. This is about the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem. Charlie, would you say it's a bad thing when you're bragging about shooting your dogs?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, which made it kind of perplexing that she did this, right? It happens that people need to put down their dogs, right? That's not, I think, the objection here, right? And it's not like either that this was some like bombshell report that's from anonymous sources. She wrote about this saga in her book. So she was essentially talking about how she shot her dog several times and put it in a gravel pit because, we love doing humane stuff, right? Like, what is going on with these people? This is someone who I think was generally thought of as a possibility to be Trump's vice presidential pick. That would seem to be a bad idea at this point, because people on all sides of the ideological spectrum are, in fact, turning on her, because if there's one thing that actually does bring people together, it's puppies. And when you shoot a dog several times and then brag about it and talk about how much you hated the dog and how much it had to go, then that's not just possibly animal abuse. that is something that is going to make you very disliked among just about everybody, Charlie.
Yeah, that is a great way to bring down your approval rating. Supreme Court, take notes.
It's actually funny because I feel like she was pretty well received in Republican circles for a while, and it's amazing how you can tank it. Like, what is the point of writing about this in your book?
I
Doesn't
don't
this feel
know.
like a secret that you would take to your grave if you had done something like this, especially if you're trying to get elected, which means getting actual people who a lot of them actually have empathy and compassion and love dogs, get those people to vote for you?
You'd think.
I I am confused and horrified, horrifyingly confused, right? None of this makes sense, and it's all awful. Like, what is wrong with these people?
I
You're killing your dogs.
truly don't know.
Yeah, all right. Enough about that, Charlie, and I'll let you get to your stat for this week.
All right, we got a baseball one today. We've had a couple teams start off the season absolutely terribly. Through 25 games, I believe the White Sox were 3-22.
Yeah, and then they rattled off 3 straight.
But okay, but my question is, through 25 games, what was the team with the worst record, and what was that record?
Okay, so the Cincinnati Reds went like 2-23 a couple of years ago, did they not?
2-23 is the correct record. You're thinking of the 2022 Reds, who went 3-22.
Okay, so wow, it's hard to do worse than 3 wins in 25 games, right?
Surprisingly, the 90.
Probably happened at other stretches of the season too, but it's hard.
I am very surprised that the Cleveland Spiders are the 99 Cleveland Spiders aren't even anywhere close to the bottom. By the way, that team won 20 games all year. If you're wondering,
Yeah, that's where I was going to go to next, because just basic math would seem to put them right
surprisingly,
down.
no. Team from 1988. Team won 54 games on the year and
And
started
who was it?
They started 2-23. It was the 88 Orioles.
So you said they won 54 games, so so they improved their pace, right? It's very hard to play at that bad of a pace all year, but you're still going to be a bad team. Like, if you go on a stretch that's that bad, I don't think you can recover from that.
No, I don't think you can either. I mean, I think
it's partly that. I think it's partly that, and I also think all teams have terrible stretches throughout the season, but I also think that to even have a stretch that's that bad, you essentially have to be a bad team from the get-go. So
yeah, good teams will lose, but they won't lose like that.
exactly.
All right, let's move on to sports. Speaking of bad teams, should we talk about the NBA playoffs? Phoenix, what are you doing?
Obviously they got swept by the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, as much as I think we're about to rag on Phoenix, the Timberwolves are a good team. I picked Phoenix to win this series, a close series before the playoffs started. After watching one game, I changed my mind, right? The Timberwolves are a good team. But if your team has Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal on it, you have no business even losing in the first round at all. You should be getting to the conference finals minimum, assuming all those guys are healthy. You shouldn't be losing in the first round, let alone being swept in the first round. So I think, Charlie, the Suns have a lot of decisions this offseason. I think it starts with their head coach. I think he has to go, right, Frank Vogel?
You got to think that, yeah. I mean, it's pretty clear he's lost the locker room. You got to think that he's gone.
Heard that his speech after Game 4 apparently came off as extremely disingenuous.
You got to think that Durant's probably gone.
So he has 2 years left on his contract, but as we all know, contracts are this super important thing to Kevin Durant. That he would never go back on a contract.
Honestly, given his history, he's probably going to sign with Minnesota now.
Yeah.
The only things left on the team are Devin Booker, who's good but can't carry a team by himself, and Bradley Beal, who I don't think any of the Suns fans want on their team.
Yeah, I'm disappointed actually that this series, that Game 4 was so close. I would have liked to see someone else step up to hit a huge 3 to cut the lead to 42 or whatever. Although that's Chris Paul's now on the Warriors, so I guess
they
weren't blown out either in the play-in.
To be fair, you could have watched somewhere in the second quarter of, I believe it was Game 4 of Dallas and LA.
Yeah,
Dallas was
that's
down
fair.
30-1 at one point, I think.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was ugly.
I
Did
want
you
your
see,
thoughts
Charlie?
on
Did
that
you see
series.
that? Did you see that Anthony Edwards poster over Kevin Durant?
Oh, that was
Uh,
wow.
I mean, he already had the dunk of the year back a few months ago, but this was also really impressive. I would say dunk of the playoffs so far. But yeah, other Western Conference series. Yeah, that Clippers
OKC's
Mavericks
moving on.
series. Okay, which one?
The Thunder are that series is over.
Oh, they're gonna. I said that this could actually go seven. This is not going seven.
Okay, to be fair, it's
I
a
mean,
one one
it
point
might be over before this episode's released.
1 point game at halftime in Game 4.
Yeah, but again, there's a good chance it's going to be over before this episode's released. I don't know what to make of that Clippers Mavericks series. We're tied at 2, correct?
Yes, I believe.
Yeah,
At the time
so
of recording this, anyway.
yeah, I don't. There's not a game until Wednesday night, and then they play Game 5 Wednesday, Game 6 Friday, and Game 7 on Sunday, which seems like they're really trying to squeeze stuff in there at the end. But I do think that this series could go 7. These teams have seemed pretty evenly matched to me so far, right? There's been games that just have clearly gone in one direction from the get-go. There have been some close ones. I don't know. I've enjoyed this series quite a bit. And then in that other series, Charlie, we were wrong. Because apparently nobody beats the Lakers 12 straight times, Charlie. You can't do it. It's impossible. You can't beat them 12 straight.
No, but I mean, they're losing in 5 or 6. They're not coming all the way back.
I would be completely shocked. So game 5 is Monday night, just coming up about an hour after we're recording this. But I would be completely shocked if Denver does not end the series Monday night. And if there's a game 6, I think things could actually get interesting. But
No team ever come back
ultimately,
from down 3-0.
no, and I don't think the Lakers are a good enough team to do it either. That's why I don't think they're winning game 5. But I think the Nuggets could be in a little trouble if they do somehow lose game 5. On to the Eastern Conference. Charlie, on last week's episode, we said that the Celtics were going to sweep the Heat, and we were wrong before we published that episode.
Yeah, I was thinking about that while watching that after we recorded.
Yeah, I still think this is over for the Heat. Heat are down big right at the end of game 4 as of us recording this, and going back to Boston and like still no Jimmy Butler, it's not happening.
Yeah, no, it's not.
And then the Knicks 76ers, Charlie, have we had 3 like super close games so far?
I think really all of the games have been close.
This has just been one of the best series of playoff basketball I've watched in quite some time. Knicks up 3-1 and heading back to the Garden, so I think that might do it for the series, but it's been fun. Embiid has finally actually performed. It's been good. What's not been good is the performance of the Milwaukee Bucks without Giannis. This
Or
series is
Dame,
over.
or Bobby Portis.
Sure, this series is over. And game 3 was the last chance for the Bucks to get back into the series. Once they lost game 3, I had a feeling this was over, and they tried. They really tried in game 3, particularly Chris Middleton. That was an all-time ending to a playoff game, Charlie.
Oh, absolutely. They're going to be playing that one back on ESPN in a little bit. That's a 30 for 30 documentary right there.
Exactly. And then right, it's gotten a bad rap because it's between two teams that are frankly kind of nobodies, and no one's especially interested in it, and essentially all the games have been on NBA TV. But Magic and Cavaliers has actually been a really good series so far, and we're knotted up at 2 as of this recording.
Yeah, the Cavaliers' plan to tank and get an easier opponent in Orlando seems to have not worked.
No, it
at
I
all.
mean, they could still win the series. In fact, I'll say it right now. I think that they're going to still win this series, but it's definitely getting risky territory for them. All right,
whoever wins the series, have fun against Boston.
yeah. All right, let's talk Stanley Cup playoffs, and then we'll get to the recapping the NFL draft. Charlie, one series is already over. The New York Rangers swept the Washington Capitals. Alex Ovechkin's done. Rangers moving on. They're actually a really good team. There could be a scary team in this playoffs, but I think really these playoffs, Charlie, are wide open.
Yeah, you really got to think they are. Florida also finished off Tampa as well.
Yeah, in 5 games, with a big 6-1 win in game 5. So
But yeah,
the
just looking
two-time
around,
champ is out. Or sorry,
Vegas is
the
up on
back-to-back
Dallas
champion a few
2-1.
years ago.
Colorado leading Winnipeg 3-1. Vancouver up on Nashville after Nashville imploded in Game 4. They're up
Another
3-1.
really all-time ending. Just Nashville had a chance to ice the game with an empty net goal, went off the post, and then Vancouver comes back, scores 2 on the 6-on-5, including one with 7 seconds left. Then wins it in overtime. And Charlie, there's another reminder too. There's nothing in sports really that beats playoff hockey or playoff overtime hockey.
Playoff overtime hockey is great. And then those other series, Edmonton 3-1 over the Kings.
Yeah, that
Boston up
series is
3-1 on
over.
Toronto.
I like Edmonton to go deep in this in these Stanley Cup playoffs as well. Not all the way, but I do think that they'll go deep.
And Carolina up
Colorado's really pitching
3-1 on the Islanders. Islanders winning in overtime in Game 4 to stay alive.
Yeah, another good game. Some decent matchups coming up. Too. The Panthers will play the winners of the Bruins Maple Leafs series. And Charlie, the Leafs are doing it again.
The Leafs are doing it again. Now, can Florida do what they did to Boston again?
Yeah, this figures to be something of a revenge series for the Bruins. At least that is what they would hope. Also, Rangers Hurricanes, which I think is what we're going to get. That should also be another good series. Maybe not as fun as Rangers Islanders would be. And then it looks like we're probably going to have at least one Canadian team in the conference finals between the Oilers and the Canucks. They'll probably face off in the second round. So that's it for the Stanley Cup playoffs for this week. Now, Charlie, let's talk about the NFL draft. And we've got some thoughts. And let's start with offense. The first 14 picks of this draft, Charlie, were offensive players, 6 of them quarterbacks. Previous record was 6 quarterbacks in 27 picks, I believe. There were 6 in the first 12. What did you think of that?
I mean, everything was going good through 7. Everything made sense. And
Exactly,
then Atlanta happened.
Yeah, I
Colin,
didn't really see any surprises early, but I did.
I know you've been talking about this. I'm just gonna let you go off on this because I know you've been wanting to talk about this.
Yeah, like you said, no real surprises. Williams number 1, Jaden Daniels number 2, Drake May number 3, Harrison number 4. That was my prediction all the way. Joe Alt going number 5 was a little surprising to me. I thought that the Chargers would trade that pick, but the Vikings, they did end up getting the quarterback that we all knew they wanted in J.J. McCarthy. But the Falcons pick at number 8 just completely shocked me. First of all, you just signed Kirk Cousins. He's guaranteed something like $100 million 2 seasons. The Atlanta Falcons overall are not a very good football team. They're better than they were last year because their biggest hole last year was quarterback, but they're still like a 9-win football team maybe. And you just have this perfect opportunity at 8 to supplement your roster around Kirk Cousins, this guy that you put a lot of faith in clearly because you signed him to a 4-year deal with $180 million. So it made a lot of sense to go out and get like a Byron Murphy, Dallas Turner type, right? Dallas Turner's the guy I had mocked to the Falcons at 8, and it would have made a lot of sense. And it didn't have to be a defensive player; it could have been an offensive player, but should have really been anyone except a quarterback. And you go with a quarterback, not just at any point in the draft. No, at number 8. Right? I get that this is a loaded quarterback draft class. It really is, but this pick just makes no sense. You failed to supplement your roster in the way you need. You probably pissed off Kirk Cousins. And frankly, you probably pissed off Michael Penix Jr. too. Michael Penix Jr. is 24 years old. Michael Penix Jr. is an NFL-ready quarterback. Of the 6 big quarterbacks that were drafted here, Williams, Daniels, May, Penix, McCarthy, and Nix, Penix is arguably the most NFL-ready. He, if not for the injury concerns, There's no debate that he was a better choice than J.J. McCarthy, and honestly, he's probably goes above Drake May and maybe even Jaden Daniels in this draft, if not for the injury concerns. Clearly NFL ready. He is the only one of those 6 that is not going to be on a team in which their starting job is open. He is, again, probably the most ready, and given that he's 24, is he going to sit behind Kirk Cousins for 4 years? Is he going to have to get a second contract without having played? Because if so, he's going to be 28 and hasn't played. So you either have to trade him, which in that case, why did you draft him? You could have traded down in the draft if you didn't want to pick there. Or you have to find a way to trade Kirk Cousins and his massive contract. Or you just have to get rid of him before he's even played that for you, which would make no sense, and take all the dead cap space. None of this makes sense in any way, Charlie.
No, I mean, then again, it's Atlanta. I don't really think anything with that team makes much sense.
Did you see the clip of their owner talking to their general manager right after the pick? Seemed like Arthur Blank was not happy with that.
No, it really didn't. Now, any other big surprises?
Who can blame him?
Real quick, Colin, did the Bills accidentally make the Chiefs better?
The Chiefs getting Xavier Worthy is so unbelievably unfair, man. The first 3 wide receivers, right? I think there's a gap between them and the rest, and they all went to the teams I expected them to go to. But Xavier Worthy is a great wide receiver, and the Bills cannot let Kansas City get him, especially since the Bills also need a receiver. And so on that level, it doesn't make sense. And I'm not even sure if the Bills are going to be a competitor this year completely. I don't think that the division is excellent as it was last year or anything. But Shirley, I'm more curious about, did quarterbacks go too early? Because I feel like everyone wanted a quarterback, so you had to essentially pick a quarterback higher than maybe their worth, right? We saw Oregon take Bo Nix. The Broncos take Bo Nix of Oregon. And then that means the Raiders, they went with Brock Bowers after the Jets surprisingly traded their pick. They have Aiden O'Connell, but I think that they wanted to draft a quarterback, but they were not going to go Spencer Rattler, Charlie.
Yeah, I think that there was obviously this rush on quarterbacks. So if you wanted to get one, you got to get one fast. And so I think the Raiders kind of misplayed this a little bit.
Yeah. I also think the Bears, I think they only had 3 picks in this draft, and yet this was an all-time draft for the Bears. They got, I would argue they got the best player at 3 different schools, and the best player at 2 different positions and the third best at another. Caleb Williams, USC at number 1, Rome Odunze out of Washington at number 9, and then they went and drafted Iowa's punter, Torrey Taylor. Charlie, if you have not seen Torrey Taylor punt, this is
I've seen him punt.
That Iowa won football games. This is a legitimately excellent punter.
All right, now let's talk about the MLB and their jersey issue.
Well, it might be starting to get resolved. It seems like at some point later this year, we're going to get the jerseys essentially back to what they were last year, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it wasn't broken until Nike and Fanatics came along and broke it. So it looks like we're going to go back. Less see-through pants, bigger lettering on the jerseys, pants that maybe don't rip, that would be nice. Matching gray colors, that would be excellent. And, shirts that you can't see the sweat stains, right? None of this should have been happening, and just because they're changing it, that's the bare minimum. This should never have happened in the first place. And the fact it did is really, frankly, kind of disgraceful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it just shows that these were cheaply made. They didn't really prepare for it. This was a money move. The players hate it.
Yeah, definitely.
This was a mistake, but I'm glad that they're moving on from it, presumably, after this, and this whole mistake could basically just be forgotten.
I think that's going to do it for this episode of C&C Talks. Make sure to subscribe, because we have episodes coming out every single week wherever you listen to podcasts. And visit our website, cctalks.com, to learn everything you need to know about the show. And call us with your questions at 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. And follow us on Twitter at C&C Talks Podcast for more content, as well as following Charlie at C&C Talks Charlie, and join our Discord server at cctalks.com/discord so we can connect with you guys there. All of this information and more is in the description of this episode. But for now, for our producer Morris and our production designer Zack, I'm Colin.
I'm Charlie, and we'll see you next week.